Okay, we're live. Welcome to the 17th edition of the Data Value Show. Today's show is called The Value of Data Matching. And who better to speak about data matching is no other than JT. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
What's going on, Chris?
I'm good, thanks. Thank you very much for joining. So, first of all, I normally start with an introduction of how I normally know the person that's on the show. So JT lives near New York and works here, and I was here at that time regularly, and now I'm pretty much based here. So I was looking at potential people to sell to, and JT's name came up. He was in stealth mode. I thought, this guy's interesting. Let me see if I can sell to him. That failed miserably. We ended up just becoming data value drinking buddies, should we call it anyway? So catch up regularly, discussing all things data, but matching always comes up there somewhere in the discussion, and it's your background. So JT, do you want to give yourself an intro and tell me about your company that you work for? And
on the one that looks at watch.
Go for it, JT.
My background's predominantly started in finance and data. I kind of was all over the place. I started at a company called FactSet. They're like one of the big competitors with Bloomberg and S&P and Refinitiv now, which used to be Thomson Reuters after that whole thing. I started my career managing content for people in finance. Specifically, I managed fixed income data. And it was kind of understanding, I have a database. How does that interact with our other tools? How do users use it? Looking at data quality. That was my first job out of college. So I goof with people. I was a data product manager very early. But then, I spent the rest of the time kind of marshaling forward towards being doing quant research. And eventually it led me just using data more. Comically, quant research and data science and a lot of these other fields, they all are just largely kind of baskets of a bunch of different activities, right? That'll kind of center around data with varying degrees of domain expertise. As I kept moving forward, I ended up joining a company specifically building data pipelines for hedge funds and banks and a variety of other people. For people that don't know, the financial community consumes a ridiculous amount of data. There's actually a single happy hour devoted solely to that. And there's big giant events all over the country. There's a lot of data providers out there. Someone's commenting on my brewery streaming. Sadly, I am at home. I am not at the bar. I did tell Chris we should do this show at the bar. In any case,
a special one. Maybe it's the drunkard debate. We've threatened to do this before, but legal normally get involved with it at that stage when I start suggesting these things.
Probably,
so and then we'll just keep it unrecorded for now. And then if anyone wants to hear what goes on, you have to join us. That's the option.
Well, I'm jealous of Juan. Juan Cicada does his catalogs and cocktails, and you guys are always drinking. So I'm very
Yeah, I will admit I have been drinking while I was on this show, but it was the first one. It was the first one. So it's taking to where you are now, and what's the current company that you're in?
Yeah, so the one everyone loves to talk about is after I left the company building data pipelines, I worked at Palantir for a little while. I don't tout that as much just because I wasn't there for a terribly long period of time. It was a great experience. I love that place. I was a fanboy of their product before I worked there. I very much appreciate their product. It is very expensive, but I think it's amazing. I think my veritably hot take is if you watch how Databricks and Snowflake are evolving, they're actually kind of marshaling towards where Palantir is now, which is kind of interesting. From there, I'm at a company now called ADI. We're building it out. That was when I was in stealth, and now I'm no longer in stealth. ADI stands for Automated Data Inc. Really, we're helping people match data, right? Kind of the topic of this whole meeting. And And for context, data matching is a lot of different names. You may know entity resolution, you might know data linking. For people that have no idea what I'm talking about, you might have used a join statement in SQL or VLOOKUP in Excel. Like, you are connecting data at some point in your life. So that takes on varying degrees of complexity, as you may imagine. And that kind of coincides with, data quality. Right, and I can pick on Igor and your other show you were on. But yeah, no costumes here today.
Yeah, no, I had to change your background to a normal standard one, and not the special Halloween edition. And I really like the way you just use the term. And everyone in the data world understands what an SQL join expression is. And I think when we go into these advanced sort of matching, and this is where I'd love to get your view on, would you group them, classify them, maybe different levels of complexity to them? But yeah, I think the simplest one is saying you're just doing a join between two columns. And if we're using SQL term as well, you could be even doing a regex or a soundex or something, and it's a closest match to it.
Yep.
So
what is soundex, Chris? Who not everybody here knows what that means.
If the word would sound similar, so it's how close it is from my old days of when I used to actually have hands on keyboard, so to speak. But yeah, so how would you classify the different levels of complexity and different maybe classifications of matching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's to start, there's generally just two camps. I could further subdivide this, but there's really two camps. There's deterministic, which is A equals A, right? That's my VLOOKUP, my join.
Yep.
Even if you're using soundex, right, those values have to be the same, right? The alternative to that is, and again, in SQL, it's like using the like statement, right? And SQL doesn't give you probabilistically, how close the values are, but there's a whole realm of things that do give you either probabilities or they tell you how different the items are. For those of you that don't know this, connecting data and this notion of probabilistic matching or entity resolution, right? And I'm kind of using that somewhat synonymously. It's not entirely perfect, but the field's been around for 50, 60 years. It's been around for a very, very long time. And it started, much like other things in the data community, with the census. So census and doing lots of different statistical groups within the government. And I'll give a shout out to the folks at the Ministry of Justice who have put some things together that are awesome. They put some cool tools together. But yeah, I mean, those groups have been doing this type of stuff forever. And so deterministic is really focused on, typically you see platforms or tools that have rules-based decisions. So if name equals Chris, then link. If last name equals Tabb, then, things like that. Yeah. Do they work at LEIT Data? I pronounced it correctly to harass Igor slightly. So you can make really basic rules like that. But then, there's the other side of it, the probabilistic side, which is, if I have a list of people named Chris Tabb, I won't even call you by your legal name, but if I have a list of people named Chris Tabb, right? Maybe I have your legal name in that list. Maybe I don't. Maybe I have your company. Maybe I don't. Right? Maybe LEIT is spelled 1337. Right? That is the appropriate way to spell that word. Or it's spelled LEIT. Right? So there's a lot of different variances here. So there's different algorithms you can use to say, okay, like, I have this thing that says LEIT, I have this other thing. Phonetically, they sound similar. Maybe that's a match. Or I could say, well, they have certain characters that are similar, or maybe their addresses are the same. Maybe their phone numbers are slightly different. And this becomes more complicated because, people move, they change jobs, they change names, which is, that gets even more complicated. Or you could have a name like Elon Musk's kid, and then you just think it's a data quality issue, right? So there's a lot of That'd be really weird. You get numbers and stuff, and then you're like, what is this name? So yeah, in the probabilistic realm, there's a lot of different algorithms, and today, we're using things like, people always joke, you can throw Chat GPT at it. It's not that good. It will hallucinate. You'll get random answers. But the underlying technology, sentence transformers, embeddings, that type of stuff, that goes a long way. And where that really becomes more interesting is with around descriptions, right? Bigger bodies of text, not just names. Because when you look at like a company name, for example, right? Don't get me wrong. If the same name is in both places, the embedding will probably do a good job of finding it. But the thing it will also do is that if you have company names that have synonyms and other recognizable words, right? Like embedding models are based statistically on, words and kind of their composition and where they're located and all these kinds of factors. So it takes those in. Those are adverse effects in a lot of cases. So don't necessarily want those things playing into your model.
So you touched on an interesting point about simple rules going on matching this column to this column or these two columns to this column. But when we start to abstract away from that and its likelihood of this being the same person, and we're actually using a combination of maybe IP address, maybe last email address used, LinkedIn maybe even hashtag use can actually eliminate or give I'm going to use a Gini score, so is that do you see that coming as the next level of very advanced matching where you give us our data set, you give us the exact answer, we'll train it on that. Okay, right now we can, based on what we've trained it on before, these columns give us the best hit ratio. Let us do the joining from now on. Is that where we think we're going to get to?
Yes, and well, let me be clear. There are companies that do that today, right? Yep. There are already companies that are pretty successful that have, I'm going to air quotes, black box models, right? That are machine learning oriented, that do a lot of different things, right? And don't get me wrong, they have some interesting tech. I'm sure it works great. I think at the end of the day, I guess two things. One, I want to use every approach humanly possible, right? I want to take every possible angle at triangulating the correct answer. I don't want to use one. And I think many of those machine learning models do just look at it from one or two lenses. The other thing is that this is going to kind of sound funny, I don't particularly want to trust a trained model to do this, right? There's more domain expertise typically and leveraging more robust models as opposed to finely tuned ones. I think we've seen, at least in our experience, more success with those. And then, I mean, like, you could easily play up the fact that, well, once if I tune it on the wrong data or I tune it on the right data, and now it's too finely tuned in one area, and then I can't redeploy it to somewhere else. And then I have to go through an ML ops cycle to generate a new model. Like, there's a million things here. Like what we end up doing and what, people in, again, stats and all these groups have done for the dawn of time. They leverage a lot of these models in concert with one another. They do a lot more on cleaning and preparing the data to be, matched. I actually, we did a study. We had a model that was finely tuned on a particular LEI data. If you don't know what that is, LEI is an open source repository. It stands for Legal Entity Identifier. It's an effort to try and give companies their own unique identifier. It's all self-submitted, so take it for what it is, right? It's good at some areas and not at others. I wouldn't look for LEIT data in LEI for what it's worth. I don't think you have one. But we did a test actually between two models, and we could pick at all the nuance here, but one of them was trained on LEI's data with some normalization. And we ran it against a zero shot, a model, no training, right out of the box, with better normalization. And the one with better normalization performed better than the finely tuned one, right? And the perk on that is I can use that model on other things. I don't have to only use it on that specific purpose. So it was just because we put more processes alongside it, it performed a lot better from a normalization purpose. So, and that was only matching on name, just as an example. That was the only input we gave it. We did not give it a zillion other things.
And you just triggered a thought again. Well, we always do with our chats, you know. And it was, I think, linked to like when we talk about data quality and data quality rules need to be linked to the use case. Okay, so the use case determines what level of quality that data needs to be to satisfy that use case. So I think the same thing really is in this matching world, is because the reason what triggered it was what you're saying, and this question, I'll just put it on there, was, and this is not a hard one to go and do, and you can give your view of how you would solve that. But I think what I was thinking is that depending on what you're going to use for this, if this is a marketing campaign to go and send them some vouchers for the latest service you're providing, and it's probably not that, you know, whatever you're doing is you're matching, you know, it could have an error of it could be incorrect to some degree because it doesn't match too much. Whereas if you're going to be identifying these people for a parking ticket or something a little bit more, if you get it wrong, there could be larger repercussions or repercussions from that.
As an example.
So I think, is that something, you know, when you're defining matching and you're saying if it's deterministic or non-deterministic, if you're in the non-deterministic camp, okay, what level of inaccuracy or tolerance, maybe the right word, is acceptable for how that data is going to be used?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with how the data is going to be used. It's going to link directly back to where are you deploying it within your business. I'll give you an interesting example. And I do want to get to this Brazil one, which I think is very interesting. So let me say the Brazil one, and then I'll answer the other question. The Brazil one, I think I do a combination. Like, I feel like I would probably do some version of edit distance and sound decks, right? To take into account the accents. I think the other one that's very interesting is there's plenty of encoders or embedding models that actually take into account other languages. So that would probably be another approach, just to see if it picks up on those accents. I kind of answer all the time to some degree is okay, so the father in Brazil had 3 girls. Were they triplets, and he named all of them Maria? First of all, you have a death wish if you name all your kids Maria. That's a lot. But no, I would want to look for more data. I would try and bring in additional data sources and link them in to try and triangulate this answer, just to start from there. And let's tie this to your other question. So if they're all named Maria and I am trying to put the correct one on a marriage certificate, right, which obviously that has very dire implications if you get that wrong. There's some cases where you unfortunately have to have people go through all of the answers. And it's a terrible thing to say out loud, but sometimes you do. And I'll flip this the complete other direction. I have a buddy that works at a well-known brand, and he runs, machine learning, AI, data there, the whole nine. Oh yes, triplets. Thank you. He runs data at this well-known brand, and he was telling me they were doing research and they were trying to do entity resolution on the products, using the products that they bought as a means of trying to identify who they are, et cetera, et cetera. And he told me, I said to him, I said, oh, okay, well, like, how sensitive do you need it? Does it need to be correct? And he said, no. He just very casually said no. And he's like, it doesn't have to be that correct at all. He just needs to be directionally in the right area. And then there's the whole joke of like, am I just doing this research and, doing all these fancy things to tell the board that we have AI built into our product? Like, or is it, are you actually materially doing something? And I think he was giving it to marketing, right? And to your point, if I'm just sending out flyers, if somebody sends me a flyer for jet skiing and I don't live anywhere near where I'm going to buy a jet ski. Okay, you spent some extra money. If there is a business impact there, if you sent 10 million people that live in the middle of the country flyers to buy jet skis, they might be like, why? And then you've wasted all that money. Let's hope they live near a lake. But it depends. Which is a terrible answer that we all use in this space, but
that's why we still got jobs, you see, because otherwise we're giving all the answers. There'd be no need for consultants. So
I gotta tell you, there's a funny those motivational posters that say like really goofy things. I think that there's one about I apologize if there's any consultants watching this. There's one about consulting that says something like, if you can't solve the problem, there's good money in just perpetuating it. And then and the hashtag is consulting.
It's let me borrow your watch to tell the time is what
and you're
telling everything. So, well, I'm telling you everything you're going to present back, but so they're very useful, obviously, sometimes, in the right, depends on the use case.
We all moonlight as consultants in the data world. We all are very helpful. We all try to help each other. I mean, this is no different than you and I sitting down over one or more beers and talking about matching.
The Wednesday book special, what we call it. But
so matching is kind of interesting. So we've been talking about, you and I have been predominantly focused on entity resolution, and that's partially my fault because we started there. Around, I have a list of people or two lists of people. That's really good. City group and CIT group. Yeah, that would be a problem if you mix those up. So we've been talking about that, and and other people have mentioned companies or we could do brands, we could do a lot of things. We've done songs. You and I did songs. That was a lot of fun. We've done a bunch of other ones, but the interesting thing is that matching actually has applications outside of just putting records together. Specifically, the two that we've seen pretty commonly. One, which is standardization, which is kind of cool, right? So if I have my own internal taxonomy, right, I have a list of, a list of foods. Maybe it's my own internal food taxonomy, right? Maybe I take a data set in and I say, okay, I want to standardize those foods against my internal taxonomy, my internal classification, right? So I can use the same matching techniques to do that. Right. And thereby I'm enhancing data. I'm creating more value. I'm essentially helping people create data products in a number of those cases. And we've done exactly that. So that's, I guess, number one. Number two, and this kind of goes on both sides of the example I just gave and kind of entity resolution, is schema matching. Right. The notion that like I could take an internal schema and one for a completely new data set and say, hey, how do these fields align with each other? How do I compare them? So it's kind of like a meta problem for entity resolution to some degree. But they're really useful ways you can combine just the matching paradigm to do a lot of different things.
You've got some quick questions coming in there.
Yeah, somebody's mentioning the cascade linkage method. I am not explicitly familiar with that one. I feel like just based on name alone, it's probably what we're doing as well. Just and I can't see who asked that question, unfortunately.
No,
kudos to you for not sharing your information with StreamYard.
Which you do the same thing as well, JT.
Yes, I do the same thing. So unnamed person. So there's a common paradigm with data matching. I'm going to refresh so I can try and see who it is. It's Ramona. Of course it's Ramona.
Okay.
So here's what I'll say. There's a very common paradigm with matching data that starts with, and this might be an obvious response, but you start with the thing that's more deterministic, the more fine-grained, and you gradually get more loose over time. So, as an example, if I was matching you, Chris, like I would start with very, very explicitly, I need to know his name matches exactly, his job matches exactly, and his phone number matches exactly. I'm just arbitrarily picking 3 fields. And those are the things that I need to match perfectly, and that will give me so many matches. And then the next layer down of that says, okay, well, let me just try and just do your name. And then maybe the next layer down just says, okay, maybe I just do LEIT and lives in UK and maybe US, right? Like, so you gradually get less and less granular and kind of more fuzzy. And that we almost always use that technique. Yeah, okay, I assume so. So yeah, we almost always use that technique. A lot of other people do. I don't know. There's a bit here which is like you always want to try and match things that you have certain certain answers to, or some degree of certainty to, and then gradually get less granular. I think the other one is that what we typically do is I leverage, and I mentioned this before, I try and throw the book at things, right? So I try and leverage a number of approaches and models and extra data and triangulation as much as humanly possible, right? To try and get to the right answer. So I'm not ever using one field, one data set. I mean, if I'm limited to it, I will, but like I try and use as much as humanly possible to narrow in on the right answer. So to Ramona's point, sometimes that's a cascading, sometimes that's I'm cascading from 3 different angles into the same area. Go for it, Chris.
Yeah, I think I was just doing some research as well at the same time with some great questions. So a double metaphone will account for phonetical changes in different languages. So German, Celtic, Greek, French, Italian. But it doesn't solve the problem because she just keeps raising the bar and saying, okay, well, you have to, but passport doesn't take into account that. So yeah, we can't solve. Yeah, we'd love to know how they solve that problem and who this Brazilian person that actually had these 3 daughters.
Why
did you meet him and find out more about him? If he's out there listening, please reach out.
Yes. If anyone knows someone that lives in Brazil, this is an interesting entity matching problem.
Yeah.
If anyone knows somebody that lives in Brazil that has 3 daughters that are all named very similar, and they're triplets, let's just throw that one in there. Please reach out because we would love to try and match.
This is like crowdsourcing data quality as a way of doing it, or human in the loop, as we call it, human in the loop verification.
But like data quality, you mentioned data quality a couple times, and I think it's really interesting because there's I guess there's a couple things to say here. One, the whole idea of probabilistic matching is purely a function of the fact that the data quality is not there, right? If the data quality was there all the time for all things in all places, it would just always be deterministic. I'd say Chris is Chris, and we'd move on with our lives. And now we as data people know that the odds of that happening are, very, 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 if not unrealistically slim, right? If not completely impossible. So
not in our lifetimes, put it that way. Definitely not mine.
Any lifetime.
You might have a few more years with JT, so maybe in yours.
When the singularity happens and we have machines running the world and Skynet, and maybe then they'll get it together, but I also don't think they'll figure it out either. But I think from a data quality perspective, right, there's almost an inverse relationship between your ability to match or link data and the quality of the data, right? Obviously, the worse the quality, the harder it is to match, and vice versa. And I was actually, it comes into play. So the other, we haven't mentioned this yet, but the other application or synonym to entity resolution sometimes is deduplication, which is kind of an interesting one as well to say. Deduplication is really just I'm matching myself, right? And just saying like, okay, do I have any records that are the same other than, the identity of matching the record itself? So that one's super, super common. And that's a very common data quality metric as well. And I find it interesting. We don't see a lot of that, right? Like we have all the all the different data quality platforms out there, and most of them focus on deterministic deduplication efforts and less the fuzzy versions, which is kind of interesting, and that may change.
And just as you're saying that, I mean, and in fact, my first probably ever data warehouse project I worked on in the 90s was, I was using DBase 4 files. That was how rock and roll it is, or how old I am, one of the two. But it was doing that deduplication of how a company or a company name had been entered, and with dots, without dots, in capital letters, fully described, spelled incorrectly. If I had entered it in, maybe, but it's that it's with my typing skills as well.
Yeah,
but it's a standalone one, but it's probably quite company specific, because there may be some groups of companies where that you could use the approach that you mentioned there of the what they call it, the city, what they call the tags. You mentioned that the company registration tags. If you're linking it back to that, but there's, I suppose, that a human in the loop within a company. Once you've done that matching once, every time you've seen that, you want that to be reused. You've taught it something. You fed that back in.
Yes and no. So I agree with, in most cases you want it to be reused, but there's, I'll play the finance card here. There's always a temporal component to this, especially in finance with mergers and acquisitions and all that stuff. And we could start playing the whole buy, try, temporal, and how it's modeled, what the perspective is, so on and so forth. But so yes, and also no. I mean, I'll do this one for you. I may see an input and want to match it the same way they're on, maybe up until a window or a time or an event, and then I don't want to perpetuate that pattern forward, or there might be more sophisticated criteria where I don't, right? So again, the terrible answer of it depends, but time variance is a big problem there.
So that's a good point, because we talk about that human in the loop and that verification piece. Do you think there is a time limit to how long that verification, I think we just answered the question, but how long that verification is valid for? So there's a time to die, or time to re-verify to each matching to keep the accuracy.
Do I think there's an arbitrary one? No. I mean, but at the risk of not having, at the risk of not revisiting those answers at all, then I'd rather an arbitrary period of time than not revisiting the answers whatsoever. And again, that's in lieu of any other data or inputs or signal, etc., that may otherwise influence that decision. We've actually, given the platform that we're building, we have human in the loop. That's a key part of what we offer, because, I mean, hell, who the hell wants to build that? I mean, you just want to do your matching and figure out how to match. Like, nobody wants to go and build the whole workflow and then track overrides, track where to override, how to do it. Did Chris change this while drunk at the bar at 11 o'clock at night? And then JT reviewed it and approved it because he was with Chris at the bar. Right. And then the whole thing blows up. Right. So, all that tracking, all that infrastructure, it's a big pain. Nobody wants to build that. Right. But the human in the loop aspect, we're building that. People have asked us about exactly what, frankly, you just said, time to live. They've asked us about reminders just to go double check things. It's also really important for compliance, like just to know that a human went and made a change somewhere, right? So all these things are pretty important.
What's quite good is the fact that I actually didn't know you had. Actually, it sounds like it's actually been well orchestrated or well actually planned, this discussion, leading naturally on to a feature you've been.
Chris sent me a list of questions. I don't even remember what they were.
It was in the invite for the show. So there's only about 4 of them, and you know what, we're naturally going through them. We'll go back and make sure we've covered them all.
We'll figure it out.
We'll check. I'm sure I haven't missed anything. So so something else I had a friend of mine, Lloyd Moore, on a little while ago, and he was doing a talk about crowdsourcing data quality, and also I think the map to where data is, and there's the big boom in marketplace data being available, third-party data.
Yeah.
But I don't think anyone out there is actually performing that validation of what is the best one of these sources out there. Yeah, and there's probably things that could help with rating that, with people using it, or having that human in the loop, or different companies that may have used that data. For example, demographic, accuracy of, we've seen that even though the same campaign was run in both these areas, they have the same affluence there, but we're getting different results. Why is that? And okay, actually, there's some inaccuracy. They're not quite as affluent in that area. We'll go and revalidate that based on that human in the loop validation or stress testing of that. And I'm thinking now that there's as more of these algorithms or your service, and maybe the customers that are involved in them, if there's that feedback of how they've been used and that fed back in, you've actually crowdsourced that, and that there's a value. We have been a little while to put the value in it. The value, the V word. There's yeah. So there's some associated value in that. That map of the accuracy of the matching that's been achieved by it, and not just an individual company, but as a crowdsourced verification piece. And it's all about the stronger in the numbers. That the more it's been tested and fed back, the more accurate it's going to be.
So let's see. Can I? Oh, I can't put this up on the screen. So there's a number of things to respond to with what you just said. There's a funny XKCD for anybody that doesn't know it. And if you look at XKCD on standards, it's pretty comical. And the whole joke is like, oh, there's 14 standards. Like, how ridiculous that there are 14 standards. Let's make another standard to fix all of this. And then at the end it says there are now 15 standards.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a little bit the joke with some of this. It's like, unfortunately, with data, it is so subjective in so many areas that, like, I might come up with the best thing ever, and I promise somebody out there is going to have a disagreement with it, probably because they're using it differently than I am. And for those reasons, you can't have the best. It doesn't exist, right? That's like if you ever watch Malcolm Gladwell's TED Talk on spaghetti sauce, highly recommend it. It's fantastic.
Okay.
Short answer is there's no best. There are bests, plural. So crowdsourcing data is a tremendous and very altruistic task that I would highly be in favor of if it worked. I feel like in some ways we're just perpetuating the data quality problem at that point. I'll say openly that we're investigating something like that. For that very reason, there's tons of people that have this problem, especially looking at companies, right? Like, how do I find the data on LEIT Data? There's certain government sites among other places, but like we're investigating the crowdsourcing area. We've met several other people that are as well, and if people want to play, and we'll see if it moves, and great, and if they don't, then fine. I mean, like, it's something that's very interesting, and I think that you mentioned something else. I should have written it down. The crowdsourcing area is super, super interesting. I would love to see that come about. I'm also, just bluntly, I am very excited at us to be able to accomplish it, but I'm not that optimistic.
It will be a challenge. Something you mentioned there again, Trigger, something was that we're kicking the quality can down the road, sort of thing, or we're just carrying on. We are. But I think there's something that made me think. I think there's different types of quality that we can change, and it's in our power to. And I think that's that shift left approach of the quality can be improved on that data by putting in extra controls at the form, at the database level, wherever it is, but before it gets to us. And I think there's other quality, and it links onto the spatial use. And I think I may have mentioned on the one chatted to someone definitely about it, about the conference I went to about spatial data, and there was a good use case there, which I'm going to reference. And there's some quality we're never going to be able to change of data, and it's not probably in our normal use of it of a on web form or something. It's an image or something. So I'll give two examples. One, a number plate maybe for an image recognition, or the other one could be satellite data. I've got two examples of both of them. A satellite data that's taking images that could be affected by cloud. You can't get rid of the cloud. The cloud's already there. At that time, that cloud was there. You cannot change it.
There's a double entendre there, which is kind of comical. It's like, how is AWS impacting this image? Both cloud. I'm using cloud in both ways.
Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, sorry, I wasn't in joke mode. I now get it now. But I think the other one was a funny story I saw was, a speeding ticket, car going through it, but a seagull had flown just in front of the number plate at that time, saving that car, saving that driver, that
trained seagull.
Yeah. So yeah. That'd be great if you could train a seagull just to follow you and just avoiding you.
Yeah, avoid all the lights.
Yeah. But no, you can't change in those two scenarios. You're never going to be able to change the quality of that particular image that was taken. So in the scenario that we can't go and perform that shift left and go and put that validation, we have to deal with these other quality issues which are out of our control, or God's will, as we want to call it, whatever. So I think those ones, there's going to be a tolerance level of how accurate it could be used. So obviously the seagull flying in front, is never going to be able to use it. You can't see it at all. Whereas the cloud coverage, and this is the example that I had with spatial data, and I think it's great to get your view of how you see matching working in that spatial world, because again, we're working very much in that finance industry or normal structured data to some degree. And I think the spatial data is the first time you're seeing layers of information that have come from different sources that have collected different things, and the common thing is the location. That's the common. Everything else, it's time and what it found at that point, and that could be from ordnance survey mappings of knowing where locations are, to image recognition, to things being built by humans on the land, or even by ultraviolet rays being reflected or captured as part of a different satellite imagery that's taken out there. And there's probably other things that link to that, which maybe census information that goes and joins to that. So where do you see where do you see the world of that and matching evolving over the time?
I mean, I think the simplest and potentially the most obvious is just embrace it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of people that are leveraging spatial just generally.
Mm-hmm.
So making tools and making it easier for people to step into that world. I mean, like, that's, again, things we are helping with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give a bit of a shout out to Ken Zokal, who's, I don't know if we've ever introduced you to him, but he has a company called Spatial Risk Systems, and they are very directly doing spatial matching for risk indicators, right? And the data is really cool. And I know Ken from my days at FactSet, and he built a whole, probably majority of their backbone doing things like entity resolution, etc. But yeah, I mean, like, people, there is a contingent of people who are very knee deep in image recognition and spatial, etc. And they probably work at S3 or something like that, right? Like, and there's the whole conference of people and that just focus on spatial data. And I think it was only, I don't know, like a couple years ago, maybe like 4, that it was like the World Economic Forum or World Bank or someone coined spatial finance as a thing, and all spatial finance really was saying, hey, we're going to look at satellite data now, right? But yeah, you're absolutely correct. With spatial, there's a lot of layers that you can incorporate. There's a lot of different sources. I mean, time variance is probably the smallest problem with that data. I think the other one is there's a veritable granularity problem with spatial data because, okay, so let's play this fun game. Where are you now, Chris?
I'm in Edgewater, New Jersey.
Okay. You could have said in your house. You could have said in a chair. You could have said in the United States. Right? Those are all correct answers. Right? That's like the Celebrity Jeopardy. Indoors. Right? So there's a lot of different answers you could give, and they're just different layers of granularity. So especially when you think about, okay, is this business located at 123 Main Street? Well, it's like, well, if that's a giant office building, then sure, it might, be home to 20 other businesses, or maybe it's not really home to it. Maybe it has a different name for the business. So there's 10 million answers to this, sadly. So there's a big granularity problem when we start thinking about spatial. And then, there's the 10 million different codes that are used. Everything from census blocks to FIPS. There's a variety of them, and they're all created for different purposes, whether it be mail or voting or census or so. Yeah, location's really hard. Spatial's really hard. Lat long is great, but then you start most likely having to get into a conversation about areas and geofencing and that kind of stuff, because lat long might give me the front door of a building or the middle of a building, but is that the building? What? Am I trying to pinpoint your chair in your home in Edgewater?
Yeah, I think it also, and again, just triggered off this conversation, has a security implication to it as well. So the more that you're able to infer, might be good for some forensic evidence if you want to find out if someone pulled the trigger or whatever like that. But in as normal people going for everyday lives, how much how much can be ascertained from the data that is available on us, and doing deterministic matching of the likelihood of this. I'd logged into a few hotspots or something, and then okay, right now they know my tracking of my locations. Now they
Do we
can
need to smuggle you out of the country, Chris? Is that what you're secretly?
No, I'm all right. I'm legit. I'm okay.
Blink twice if you're under duress.
Well, I haven't been kidnapped. I'm here on my own will.
Okay, I'm just.
I was told to say that as well.
This is entirely my own opinion and not reflective of anywhere I've worked previously. Personally, there's a bit here which is your data is everywhere. You can identify most stuff. I think it kind of comes down to how much money or effort you want to exert, right? I tell people this all the time at things like passwords and stuff like that. How much value is there to targeting me where I live for this purpose, blah, blah, blah. If someone really wants to, they can find me, right? Just like they can find you or anybody else watching this, right? I'm sure this is being live streamed to somewhere in the CIA, and they're probably,
I'm sure they're very interested in what we're doing.
Oh, yeah. No, they're definitely not. But my point is still that the question you asked around, could you do it, right? The answer is yes. It just kind of comes down to, money and effort.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, that's somewhat scary. Maybe, maybe I have a very bleak view of this, but yeah, I think it's all possible. You just have to start figuring out ways to reduce the burden. Right. And you can think about we can do the where are your customers? What are they buying? Why aren't they buying my product? Are they walking into my stores? Are they doing this? I'm sure there's enough data out there, especially the data that I'm aware of, where you can figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's down to what the efforts voted value associates with them performing that, which leads. I think I've been looking at we had the 5 points, and we've actually covered them all. I think apart from the my open-ended one, which we can continue debating on as we always do, is what's the business value? So what business value can be achieved, or matching can provide.
Hold on, I want to see if I can find this page. I'm going to see if I can do this on the fly. I was going back because I remembered a quote out of our mutual friend Joe's book. And Matt. Sorry, I quoted Joe and not Matt. He has something in here which I remembered. There's a quote in here which just pretty bluntly says, I can't find it. Pretty bluntly says, seldomly do you get value out of a single table or a single file. Right? You almost always have to connect it with other stuff.
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, you're already doing it. You probably just don't realize it. Right. And that's I feel like a lot of our space is like that, right? You're probably already joining and connecting data in interesting ways, and you maybe it's really obvious and you're doing it very deliberately, or maybe it's behind the scenes and you don't even realize it. I would argue that the vast majority of it's behind the scenes. Now, if you start to think about, and we I'm getting lots of comments in here now. It said Dan's 360. Yeah, I mean, like customer 360, that customer 360 is probably the most obvious one, especially from a sales oriented one. For anybody that doesn't know, customer 360 is the whole notion of me, saying like, oh, okay, I know everything about LEIT Data. I know Chris is, CCO there, and he lives in these places, and these are the clients they deal with, and they have these subsidiaries, and that, so it's this whole notion that I can look at a customer, ideally, or you could do other versions of 360, and see all the kind of related things for, to help with selling, among other things. So yeah, I mean, like I said, like there's a lot of this stuff that happens today. If you use Salesforce, you're joining things all over the place. You don't even realize it, right? And a lot of the time, Salesforce has done a good job of cleaning the data up and structuring it in a way that makes it easy. Anytime you use software, you're joining data, but it just happens to be that me as the engineer designed it in a way that you don't see any of it. And I created all the things to begin with, so they join very nicely. But you have to think about that like iceberg style picture to say like the stuff that we're joining is like this, and like the amount of data we have is, I can't even fit it on my screen, right? Like there's so much other stuff you could bring into the mix. I mean, there's a bit here where you just have to kind of like stop and say, what if?
Yeah, I think it's art of the possible. I always just like the term art of the possible, and I think with other ways of matching, joining, bringing data together that are becoming easier and more accessible, it does mean that the art of the possible is becoming more. You can do more and more. So I think we should be thinking, okay, if with no limitations, I think, what would I want to achieve? And then working back from that is how can you achieve what of those things is actually possible? And with more data sets, more algorithms that can actually provide that deterministic matching, we're going to be able to achieve more.
We're going to be able to do a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, like Joe was on with Inman the other day, Bill Inman, right? And he was talking about how the vast majority of things that like data in a business are predominantly unstructured, right? Which is, I have tremendous amount of respect for Bill, but like didn't need him to tell us that. I think for us in the profession, we've known this. He just happens to be trying to solve it, which is amazing. But if you think about the fact that like, okay, let's play customer 360 to use Dan's example here, right? Like I could do customer 360 on the data that was inputted by my lovely sales team. And maybe this salesperson may or may not be named Chris that didn't type in any notes on the client for the call that we just had. Yeah, probably. Yeah, it makes sense. Okay. So so our salesperson Chris didn't type any notes in, but they had a call. It was on Zoom. There was a number of email correspondence, right? And how do I get that 360? Like, I only have the handful of information that I have access to. Maybe, our salesperson used Gong or something like that to transcribe it. Maybe that starts to link things together. Okay, we're taking steps forward, but Gong is just a system to try and go from unstructured audio to structured, well, not even structured, it's semi-structured, right? It goes to something that I can then use programmatically. But if you think about that, like, we can keep playing that forward, right? You had emails, we probably slacked about it to say, hey, Chris, why didn't you take notes on that customer, right? Like, so there's probably a lot of other correspondence and things that go on around that customer that just aren't in a machine readable format or in a unstructured format that can't be used in that customer 360 that you might want to use in that customer 360. And all of that ultimately comes down to some form of probabilistic matching, which, to bring it full circle, there's a bit there which is also named entity recognition, which is a little bit different. I know Ramona posted this thing.
I know she's put in the same trouble. But well, I know the world can be, and this is where matching can help even more. So this fake derogatory commentary that they may have created in my voice that can be put out there, but it was created with a Windows machine, and I've never used Windows, but I have many years ago. But and it was created in, it's got may have some other information that would indicate that it isn't a normal pattern for mine. So so I think there's maybe have to be some fake or fraudulent detection stuff out there as well. So thank you for the use case there.
It overlaps with a lot of, I mean, you could argue that matching, and I've read some books on this, like matching overlaps with recommendation systems, with search, with a whole slew of things. Right now, I'm not trying to build a search engine, to be clear, but like the implications of what you can do with it are pretty big. Someone mentioned to us, and we were just talking to them about what we do. They're like, oh, could you, generate a list of comps from a financial perspective, right? Comparable numbers or M&A, et cetera. That is a search use case. That's also a matching use case. So yes, right? I could generate a watch list. Like there's a lot of things I can do. There's a common paradigm in finance called screening. Screening is really a layer of rules, right? Match A, match B, if like C, blah, blah, blah. It's like a where clause, but like a really sophisticated version. You could make the same argument that I could build a screening engine by doing matching, and it's all just probabilistic linkages. So yeah, there's a ton of applications. It all leads to more business value, right? I would probably, from the business value question, just to go back to that, I'd probably start with, and you probably already start with this, like, what is your business actually doing? What are you selling? How does it work? What is the process, right? And then what are things that you do as part of that process and the people to continue to operate? Like what other information do you have? How do you fuel? What are the drivers, right, to be more financially oriented of that business, right? And how do I increase those, right? So all the things I just said I was effectively joining in. I'm linking data for business purpose, for value. Right? So it all can be used by the business for the business. So help us God.
I think again, as always, JT, as always, hit the nail on the head.
I
know it's great. It's first one ever, isn't it? I think it's the business processes, isn't it? So you understand the business process, and have another lens. I think we've always well, especially myself, and maybe not you because you're in this world a little bit more. Data people normally tend to go through the standard way of joining or bringing things together, and we normally think, okay, we've got to hit the quality, we've got to have unique keys for this, we've got to do this, because we also know it's very expensive to join on these things that don't have that, and the inaccuracies that come into it. But as we add these other types of data, and we're becoming more, I use Teams, it will say to me on a meeting with you, it'll tell me all of the last emails, how we'd get attachments or something, because they may be useful. So it's that same thought, is once you understand what people do in their jobs, and you'll say, okay, well, what could be used to simplify or make that process, I use less friction, reduce the friction in our everyday activities, and make it more effective. We could carry on for ages, and we can carry up on Wednesday, or catch up again if you want, but won't be record that one. I'll just add to the so next week we've got the value of a data security platform. A good friend Eldad, known and see what they've been doing at Satori for a few years now. Love what they do, so we can talk about how a security platform is going to help your business as well. So JT, pleasure as always good chatting. If anyone out there wants to know about you, or where they can find you, or find it anymore, do you want to let the audience know where they find you?
We just said you can find me however, because we all have the data to hunt me down where I live. But LinkedIn's the easiest one. Yep. If you want to learn about what we're doing a little bit more, it's automated-data.io. But yeah, I mean, I'm big on, I'm a high touch kind of person, and I don't mean that from the platform. I mean that from the pick up and call me kind of person. So yeah, definitely. I'm always open to chatting with people.
Yep, I know that. I can guarantee, I can concur as well. So great chatting, JT, and thanks everyone out there. So Dan tuning in, Roman for all our great questions. And
we
Val,
have to look for that guy with the 3 Maria daughters. Thanks to
but please get in touch if you're out there. We're awaiting your call. All right, thanks JT. Thanks everyone. That's a wrap. Let's end the stream.